Chapter 1, Clash of Ideals. The open office buzzed with the sound of keyboards clacking, muffled conversations, and the occasional ringing of phones. Asher Sullivan sat at his pristine desk, posture rigid, eyes scanning the latest campaign report. His lips pressed into a thin line as he scrolled through the document, his irritation growing with each passing second. It was incomplete. No, worse than incomplete, it was untouched. And the deadline was in less than 30 minutes. Finn, Asher's voice sliced through the air, cool and sharp. Across the room, Finn Carter stretched lazily in his chair before tilting his head toward his boss, a slow grin playing at his lips. Yeah? Asher inhaled deeply, willing himself to remain composed. This report was due today. You haven't started. Finn blinked, then tapped his temple. Started. Just not written down yet. Asher's fingers tightened around the edge of his desk. That's not how this works. It's how I work, Finn countered easily, spinning slightly in his chair. Relax, boss. It'll be done before the deadline. The sheer audacity of the statement made Asher clench his jaw. He hated people like Finn, brilliant but insufferably lazy, someone who relied on raw talent instead of discipline. Efficiency does not mean waiting until the last minute, Asher bit out, his patience fraying. Finn flashed him a wink. Depends on how you define efficiency. For a moment, Asher entertained the idea of dragging Finn out of his chair and forcing him to sit through a lecture on time management. But before he could formulate a proper retort, Finn turned to his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. In 12 minutes, 12 infuriatingly short minutes, the report landed in Asher's inbox. It was flawless. Asher stared at the document, his expression unreadable. The work was immaculate. Structured. Insightful. Damn it. The conference room was filled with the quiet hum of anticipation as the marketing team prepared for their weekly meeting. Asher stood at the head of the long table, flipping through his meticulously prepared notes. His department was competent, some more than others, but he had learned to set his expectations high. Too high, some might say. We've spent the past 3 days refining the launch strategy. Now, I want insights on how we can improve our engagement rate, Asher began, his tone clipped and professional. One of the analysts hesitantly raised a hand. Mr. Sullivan, we've been struggling with the new SEO updates. Some of our targeted metrics aren't aligning with the latest algorithm changes. Asher nodded. We've been working on this issue for 3 days. Right, but we still don't have a clear. Actually, we do, Finn interjected, stretching his arms over his head as if he had just woken up from a nap. Every head turned toward him. Asher's gaze darkened. Explain. Finn cracked his knuckles, grinning. Give me 3 minutes. Milo, seated toward the back, smirked. This should be interesting. Rowan leaned closer. Bet you $5 he actually pulls it off. Milo chuckled. I'm not betting against him. Meanwhile, Asher crossed his arms, watching as Finn's fingers danced across his keyboard with an ease that should have been illegal. The room was silent except for the rapid tapping of keys. Data flashed across the screen, numbers shifting and recalibrating at an alarming speed. Then, with a final keystroke, Finn leaned back, hands behind his head. Done. A heavy silence filled the room. Asher opened his mouth, then shut it again. He quickly scanned the updated figures and adjustments Finn had made. The logic was flawless. The problem that had taken him 3 days to dissect had been solved in 3 minutes. Rowan let out a low whistle. Damn. That was kinda sexy. Milo chuckled. Told you he'd do it. Asher's fingers curled into his palm, his irritation barely contained. He exhaled sharply. This was supposed to take extensive analysis. Finn shrugged. Or, it just needed a fresh perspective. The room erupted into murmurs, a few team members exchanging impressed glances. Asher, however, remained rooted in place, the muscles in his jaw tightening. This isn't over. Back in the open office, Rowan nudged Milo. So, who do you think snaps first? Milo adjusted his glasses. Asher. Definitely. Rowan laughed. Oh, come on. Finn might not seem like it, but he's got an ego the size of this building. If Asher keeps pushing, he'll be the one to crack first. Milo hummed, considering. Want to make it interesting? Rowan smirked. You're on. Across the room, Asher was glaring daggers at Finn, who was now propping his feet up on his desk, sipping his coffee like he hadn't just humiliated his boss in front of the entire department. This was far from over. And Asher was going to make damn sure Finn Carter learned what real discipline looked like. Chapter 2, Forced Cohabitation. The moment Finn Carter stepped into the apartment, he knew he was in trouble. The space was pristine, unnaturally so. The furniture was arranged with military precision, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant, and not a single item looked out of place. Even the books on the coffee table were stacked in perfect alignment, their spines facing the same direction. This wasn't just clean. This was Asher Sullivan clean. Finn exhaled dramatically, dragging his suitcase inside before flopping onto the couch without ceremony. Well, this is going to be fun. Asher's voice, sharp as ever, cut through the air. Get your feet off the couch. Finn cracked an eye open. His new temporary roommate stood near the kitchen, arms crossed, gaze filled with unfiltered disapproval. You're joking, right? Finn drawled, stretching even further across the cushions. I do not joke about cleanliness. Finn groaned but swung his legs down. So, just to clarify, because I still don't believe this nightmare is real, you and I are living together? In this very apartment? Asher pinched the bridge of his nose as if suffering from a migraine. Unfortunately, yes. It had all started that morning when Finn received a call from his building management, informing him that an emergency renovation was necessary due to faulty plumbing. His apartment was rendered unlivable for at least a month. GMM's HR department, in a rare show of efficiency, had arranged alternative housing. Finn had expected a generic corporate rental, maybe even a hotel. Instead, they had assigned him Asher Sullivan's meticulously maintained apartment. Finn suspected dark forces were at play. I don't get it, he mused, rubbing his chin. Of all the places, why here? I have a spare room. Finn blinked. You let HR know you had a spare room? No, but Caleb did. Finn let out a long, suffering groan. Caleb, Asher's equally ruthless best friend, was definitely behind this. I'm going to kill him. You'll have to get in line. Asher's voice was dry. He thinks this will be character building for both of us. Translation, he wants to see if we'll survive without actual bloodshed. Precisely. Finn smirked. Want to make a bet? Asher narrowed his eyes. No. Boring. The next morning, Finn learned that Asher's rigid discipline didn't end at the office, it dominated every aspect of his life. The alarm blared at exactly 5:30 a.m. Finn barely registered the sound before he was yanked from sleep by the scent of freshly brewed coffee. And was that classical music? Bleary-eyed, he stumbled out of his room and into the kitchen, where Asher stood, already dressed in crisp business attire, sipping from a perfectly proportioned espresso cup. Finn scowled. It's 5:30. Who even functions at this hour? People with responsibilities, Asher replied smoothly. Unlike you. Finn grunted and opened the fridge, searching for something that required minimal effort. The sight before him made him pause. Everything was labeled. The eggs, the milk, even the damn condiments had precise expiration dates written in clear, neat handwriting. Finn reached for a carton of juice. Asher's voice stopped him. Use a glass. Finn popped the cap open and took a long swig straight from the carton, maintaining eye contact the entire time. Asher's nostrils flared. You are insufferable. Finn wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. And you are terrifying. But hey, opposites attract, right? Asher gave him a withering look before returning to his coffee. If you insist on staying here, you will follow my rules. Finn exhaled heavily. Fine. Lay it on me. 1. No leaving dishes in the sink. Reasonable. 2. No unnecessary noise past 10 p.m. Finn smirked. Define unnecessary. Asher's gaze darkened. 3. Do not touch my things. Finn's eyes gleamed mischievously. Define things. Asher set down his cup with just a little too much force. If you make this difficult, I will personally ensure that HR finds you a different place to stay. Do you understand? Finn considered pushing his luck further but ultimately decided against it. He wasn't completely suicidal. Crystal clear, boss. Later that day, Rowan was practically vibrating with excitement as he leaned against Finn's desk. So, you and Asher. Living together. This is the reality show I never knew I needed. Finn sighed, spinning a pen between his fingers. It's barely been 24 hours, and I already feel like I'm in a hostage situation. Rowan grinned. Are you the hostage, or is he? Finn rolled his eyes. Both. Milo, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. I can make this easier for you. Finn raised an eyebrow. Oh? Milo nodded, pulling out his phone. I can program an automation system. Lights, coffee, even scheduled alarms set up to accommodate both of you. That way, you won't step on each other's schedules too much. Finn leaned in. You mean, a lazy person's dream system? Milo smirked. I mean, an efficiency booster. Rowan snickered. You just don't want to die in your sleep, huh? Finn exhaled dramatically. Look, I respect Asher's unhinged level of discipline, but if I have to wake up to Mozart at sunrise every day, I might actually lose it. Milo tapped on his screen. Give me an hour. I'll have something set up remotely. Rowan grinned, patting Finn's shoulder. Oh, this is going to be fun. Finn had a sinking feeling Rowan was right. Chapter 3, Growing Synchronicity. Finn had always thought of Asher as a machine efficient, relentless, and utterly humorless. Living together hadn't changed that impression much, but it had added layers to the man he once saw as just an overbearing control freak. There was a method to Asher's madness, a discipline that Finn had to, grudgingly, respect. He still thought the man was a pain in the ass, but now he understood why. Asher, on the other hand, had come to an uncomfortable realization of his own. Finn, despite his infuriating work ethic or lack thereof, was not careless. He didn't procrastinate out of laziness, he did it because he could afford to. His mind worked in ways Asher couldn't quite grasp, breaking down problems at a speed that should have been impossible. Still, Asher wasn't about to admit he was impressed. And Finn wasn't about to admit he was starting to take his job more seriously. So instead, they settled into an unspoken truce. The office was unusually tense that morning. Finn, for once, was already at his desk when Asher arrived, which was suspicious enough. Even more alarming was that he was focused. No lazy smirk, no exaggerated stretch of boredom. Just typing. Asher frowned. What's going on? Finn glanced up. You don't know? Asher's frown deepened. If I did, I wouldn't be asking. Finn leaned back, crossing his arms behind his head. Rowan roped us into a last-minute pitch presentation. The client moved the deadline up. We need a revised proposal by this afternoon. Asher's expression darkened. And when were you planning on telling me this? Right now. Finn grinned. Surprise. Asher inhaled sharply, closing his eyes for a second as if summoning patience. You couldn't have told me this earlier? I found out 10 minutes ago. Finn gestured toward his screen. I've already drafted the key points. You handle structure better than I do, so I figured I'd wait before finalizing it. Asher was about to snap at him for his usual last-minute antics, but then he saw the document on Finn's screen. The outline was solid, concise, well-researched, and already addressing potential client concerns. He hated how effortless Finn made it look. Fine, Asher muttered, pulling out his chair. Let's get to work. For the next few hours, they worked in rare sync. Finn took care of the creative aspects, shaping the presentation in a way that would hook the client immediately. Asher refined the logical flow, ensuring their pitch wasn't just flashy but also backed by solid data. Occasionally, they exchanged sharp comments, but there was no real malice behind them, just the natural rhythm of two minds who, despite their differences, functioned exceptionally well together. At one point, Asher glanced over to find Finn leaning back, arms behind his head, a smug expression on his face. "You know," Finn mused, "for someone who's supposed to hate me, you sure don't complain when I get things done." Asher rolled his eyes. "I don't hate you. I hate your methods." Finn smirked. "And yet, here we are, making magic happen." Asher sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just focus." Finn chuckled but did as he was told. By the time they finished, it was well past lunch. Asher stretched, rolling his stiff shoulders. "Not bad." Finn grinned. "That's practically a standing ovation coming from you." Just then, Rowan waltzed into the office, hands in his pockets. Well. Look at you two, actually working together like civilized human beings." Finn shot him a look. "Don't act so surprised." Rowan smirked. "Oh, I'm not surprised. I'm just enjoying the show." He nudged Milo, who had appeared silently beside him. "Told you they'd start syncing up." Milo took a sip of his coffee. "I never doubted it." Asher sighed, standing. "I don't have time for this." Rowan grinned. "That's what you always say, but we both know you secretly love our commentary." Asher shot him a glare but didn't bother responding. Instead, he turned back to Finn. "We need to rehearse this before the presentation." Finn stretched. "Fine, but only if you admit we make a good team." Asher's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, finally, he muttered, "It was effective." Finn beamed. "I'll take it." Rowan leaned closer to Milo and whispered, "They're actually getting along." Milo smirked. "Told you. Give them time." Chapter 4, Turning Point. Finn had never been the type to get attached. It was easier to keep people at arm's length, to maintain that comfortable distance where no one could expect too much from him, and he wouldn't have to deal with the inevitable disappointments that came with human relationships. That was how he had always operated until Asher Sullivan barged into his life with his infuriating discipline, impossible standards, and relentless work ethic. At first, Finn had thought the man was simply exhausting. But now, after months of working together and sharing the same apartment, he was starting to realize something worse. Asher's presence had become familiar. Comfortable, even. And that was dangerous. The trip to the client's headquarters had been a mess from the start. Their flight was delayed, the hotel had mixed up their reservations, and now, after back-to-back meetings with barely any breaks in between, Finn was watching Asher work himself into the ground like some kind of corporate war machine. "You know," Finn drawled, leaning against the hotel desk while Asher typed furiously on his laptop, "normal people take breaks. Sleep. Eat something that isn't coffee." Asher didn't even look up. "I'll sleep when we finish the proposal." Finn rolled his eyes. "That's a terrible plan." "You say that, but my methods work." Finn sighed. Yeah, efficiency and all that. But seriously, have you even eaten today?" "I had coffee." "That doesn't count." Asher still didn't look up. Finn exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. The problem with Asher wasn't that he was just a workaholic, it was that he genuinely didn't seem to notice when his body was about to give out. Finn had seen him do this before, but this time, the signs were worse. His usually sharp posture was slightly slumped, his typing was slowing down, and his face was a little too pale for comfort. And then, right on cue, Asher swayed. Finn moved without thinking. "Whoa, hey!" Asher barely caught himself against the desk, blinking as if his brain was lagging. "I'm fine." Finn scowled. "Bullshit. You look like you're about to pass out." "I just need." Whatever Asher was about to say was lost as he wavered again, and this time, Finn didn't give him a choice. He grabbed Asher's arm and hauled him toward the hotel bed. Alright, that's it. You're done. Finn, Shut up. Finn pushed him onto the mattress with surprising gentleness. For once in your life, listen to me. You are not some indestructible corporate robot. You need rest. Asher scowled but didn't argue, probably because he didn't have the energy to. He let his head hit the pillow, breathing unevenly. Finn sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'll grab you some meds and water. Stay put. As he left the room, Finn tried to ignore the way his chest felt oddly tight. By the time Asher woke up, Finn had not only gotten him medication, but he had also taken it upon himself to reorganize their notes, fix their schedule, and even leave a bowl of soup on the nightstand. Asher blinked blearily. Did you do all this? Finn, sitting on the couch, shot him a look. No, it was the magical hotel fairies. Yes, I did all this. You're welcome. Asher stared at him for a long moment. Why? Finn shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. Because you were running yourself into the ground, genius. Someone had to keep you from actually dropping dead. Asher exhaled, his gaze steady. That someone didn't have to be you. Finn shrugged, looking away. Yeah, well. Too late now. A silence stretched between them, not quite awkward, but filled with something unspoken. Finn had spent his whole life keeping people at a distance. So why was it so easy to step in for Asher without a second thought? He didn't like the answer. Back at the office a few days later, Finn regretted ever letting Rowan and Milo witness any of this. Rowan leaned against Finn's desk, grinning like he had just won the lottery. So, you, of all people, voluntarily took care of Asher. Finn didn't even look up. I don't know what you're talking about. Milo, seated nearby, sipped his coffee. He even organized Asher's files for him. Rowan gasped theatrically. No. Way. Milo smirked. He also made sure Asher ate actual food. Rowan clutched his chest. Oh my God. Who are you, and what have you done with Finn Carter? Finn groaned. You're both insufferable. Rowan wagged a finger. Don't deny it, buddy. You care. Finn scoffed. I was just making sure my boss didn't die. It was self-preservation. Milo raised an eyebrow. Right. And it had nothing to do with the fact that you practically babysat him for 2 days? Finn shot him a glare. It was 1 day. Rowan snickered. Doesn't matter. You're changing, Finn. You even stayed late to help him finish work. What's next? Voluntary overtime? Finn rolled his eyes. You're both idiots. Rowan grinned. Say whatever you want, but at least now you actually do your work on time. Finn opened his mouth to argue but found that he couldn't. Because, annoyingly, Rowan was right. And that was the most unsettling realization of all. Chapter 5, Warming Affection. Finn had never been one for routines. His life had always been ruled by convenience, working when he felt like it, sleeping at odd hours, and generally avoiding anything that resembled structure. But now, without even realizing when it had started, he was waking up at the same time every morning. He was making coffee before Asher even asked. He was adjusting. And it was terrifying. He told himself it was just because living with Asher forced him into certain habits. That was logical. That made sense. But then why was he staying later at the office when he didn't have to? Why was he actually finishing his work early, not because he wanted to avoid Asher's nagging, but because he wanted to see the satisfaction in Asher's eyes when things were done right? It was getting out of hand. Asher wasn't blind. He saw the way Finn's habits were changing, the way his once chaotic schedule had started to align more closely with his own. And, more disturbingly, he didn't mind it. It had started small, Finn sticking around a little longer after work, offering to grab dinner without being prompted, actually keeping his side of the apartment clean. At first, Asher had thought it was just a temporary phase. But then Finn started anticipating his needs. A second coffee waiting on the counter when Asher was running late. Notes prepped before he even asked for them. Subtle shifts that made their dynamic feel comfortable. And Asher didn't do comfortable. One evening, Finn was sprawled out on the couch, laptop balanced on his stomach as he skimmed through emails. Asher sat at the dining table, meticulously reviewing a report. The silence between them was natural, no longer the awkward tension it had once been. Finn yawned. So, let's say, hypothetically, someone suddenly realized they actually don't hate structure as much as they thought they did. Asher didn't look up. Hypothetically? Yeah, just a totally random thought. Asher smirked. And what brought on this hypothetical revelation? Finn hesitated. He could brush it off, make a joke, but for some reason, he didn't want to. Maybe they realized that stability isn't the worst thing in the world. That it's kind of nice having someone around who just gets things done. Asher finally looked up, his sharp eyes studying Finn carefully. That's a rare admission coming from you. Finn exhaled, rubbing his neck. Yeah, well. Don't get used to it. Asher's lips quirked up in a rare, amused smile. Noted. The realization hit Finn one night when he found himself waiting for Asher to get home. It had been a long day. Asher had left early for meetings, and Finn had stayed behind, finishing up reports at his own pace. Normally, he would have packed up and gone home without a second thought. But tonight, he lingered. Checked the clock. Waited. It was nearly 10 p.m. when the apartment door finally opened. Asher stepped inside, looking exhausted. His tie was loose, his usually impeccable posture slightly slumped. Finn frowned. You look like hell. Asher sighed, rubbing his temples. Long day. Finn stood, heading toward the kitchen. Did you eat? I had coffee. Finn shot him a glare over his shoulder. That's not food, Asher. I'll eat later. Finn didn't argue. He just grabbed a plate from the fridge, leftovers from dinner he had made earlier. He heated it up, then placed it on the table in front of Asher without a word. Asher blinked. You cooked? Don't look so shocked, Finn muttered, sitting back down. I do, occasionally, take care of myself. Asher hesitated for only a moment before picking up his fork. He took a bite, then another. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar. Finn exhaled, leaning back in his chair. You know, I used to think you were the worst person to live with. Asher raised an eyebrow. And now? Finn's lips quirked up. Still kind of the worst. But also not that bad. Asher huffed a quiet laugh. High praise. Finn shrugged. Hey, take it or leave it. Asher took another bite. I'll take it. Finn studied him for a moment, something unfamiliar settling in his chest. He could pretend this was just about convenience, about work, about anything other than what it actually was. But that would be a lie. And for once, Finn wasn't interested in lying to himself. You should let me help more, he said suddenly. Asher looked up. Help? Finn nodded. With work. With things. I don't mind. Asher's gaze softened in a way Finn wasn't prepared for. You hate responsibility. Maybe, Finn admitted. Or maybe I just didn't care enough before. A beat of silence passed before Asher set down his fork. All right. Finn raised an eyebrow. That's it? Asher smirked. Did you want me to argue? No, but I expected at least a dramatic sigh. I'll save it for later. Finn laughed, shaking his head. You're unbelievable. Asher just shrugged, picking up his fork again. Finn watched him for a moment longer, then stood, stretching. All right, I'm going to bed. Don't stay up too late. I won't. Finn hesitated at the doorway, glancing back. Asher? Asher looked up. What? Finn rubbed his neck, then let out a small huff, as if annoyed at himself. This is stupid, but I like you. Asher blinked. You what? Finn rolled his eyes. You heard me. I like you. And not just in a hey, my boss isn't so bad kind of way. In a this is a terrible idea, but I still want it anyway kind of way. Asher was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, a small, genuine smile tugged at his lips. Well, he said, voice softer than usual, I guess it's a good thing I like you too. Finn felt his heart skip. He scoffed, shaking his head. God, we are such a mess. Asher smirked. A productive mess. Finn chuckled. Fine. But if you make me wake up at 5 a.m. on weekends, I'm breaking up with you. Asher shook his head in amusement. Noted. Finn grinned. Good night, Asher. Asher watched him disappear into his room, a quiet chuckle escaping him. Good night, Finn.